G'day footy fans, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Stubbs, and before the preseason starts, I want to quickly talk about North Melbourne and why I think they may surpass everyone's expectations in 2021. And before we start, if you go on to enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe if you like to see more content like this. Okay, so far this off-season, I've seen nearly everyone predict North Melbourne to finish last in 2021, and for good reason as well. The reasoning being that they're at the start of their rebuild, they have a new coach, have delisted 11 players, traded out crucial starters in Ben Brown and Shaun Higgins, and had a poor finish to an already horrendous season last year. And while there have been many negatives for North Melbourne, there also have been many positives to come out of this. But looking over where their list is at, I'm optimistic to say that there is a chance that the Roos can avoid the wooden spoon this year. I mean, it's easy to forget where we all thought the Roos would end up in 2018. They were the overwhelming favourites to win the spoon, yet they proved everyone wrong by only narrowly missing out on finals, finishing in 9th and winning over half their season games.
They've got spirit, mate, and everyone says shinboner. They've got that because that's what they stand for. But they're a good football team.
Yeah, while their best team is out there, I fully expect them to make the finals.
Yeah, so do I.
And before we start, am I saying that North won't finish in last? No. The reason why I made this video was to give everyone a different perspective on North Melbourne. They are by far the easiest team to write off this year, and I thought it'd be a good idea to try and convince people otherwise. Let's begin. The first point I want to talk about is their new coach David Noble, and why I think he's the perfect candidate for North Melbourne. So what do we know about him so far? Well, his resume would show that he has previously worked for Adelaide and Brisbane, taking on numerous roles including list manager, head of football, and assistant coach. Not many people realise, but he is a big reason why Adelaide and Brisbane were successful teams. During his time in Adelaide, the Crows made 8 finals appearances, and he worked alongside well-respected coaches in Neil Craig, Brenton Sanderson, and Phil Walsh. And once he switched from being an assistant coach to a list manager in 2010, Adelaide quickly rose to power through excellent drafting and trading, as well as innovations through tactics. Some may call it a coincidence, but when he left the Crows in 2016, they did go on to make a grand final the next year, but have since fallen apart. When Brisbane decided to appoint Noble, the Lions were at their worst. They had back-to-back seasons finishing in 17th, with 7 wins combined in both 2015 and 2016. Henceforth, they acquired Noble at the end of the 2016 season. When Noble arrived, he appointed Chris Fagan as head coach. Noble had previously known Fagan, seeing as how they were both from Tasmania and were competitive rivals in the early 80s when they played in the Tasmania Football League. Fagan emphasised after his signing that the Lions would need to change culturally, and so they adopted the leading teams model, which promotes the need for direct feedback to develop leadership skills for players. In summary, the leading teams model is about creating a positive environment through communication in order to improve the morale of the team.
And I think we both took the opportunity to speak to our people independently. Chris spoke to all the players one-on-one, I spoke to all of our staff one-on-one. I wanted to know what they liked about our club. And then we worked on some areas of transition to improve in a couple of key areas. And one was clarity and one was communication. And they were really 2 simple platforms that we felt we could build some cultural shift on, and that's what I guess that's what we've attacked in the last couple of years.
Because of this model, it allowed the board to develop faith in their personnel and playing group, and as a result, took Brisbane from wooden spooners in 2017 to a top 4 team in 2019. And coincidentally, this is also the plan North has set up for Noble. Start their rebuild from the lower end of the ladder, then make the top 4 by the end of 2023. And while we're on the topic of the leading teams organisation, they set up a high performance model, which is the indicator of what makes a team successful. There are 2 elements, which includes the dynamics and the mechanics of the team.
There's dynamics and mechanics.
Yes.
The mechanics are the X's and O's, but if you haven't got your dynamic right, you can have the best X's and O's. Fix the dynamic, which is team spirit, commitment, and forge ahead that way.
Nailed it in one sentence.
The Lions and the mechanics, with their mixture of developing young and mature players, and their dynamics was sorted under the improved culture from the leading teams model. And although the Lions were yet to win a premiership, Noble decided that it was time for a change and decided to take on the role as head coach for North Melbourne by the end of 2020. So what will Noble bring to North Melbourne in 2021? Well, judging from his press conferences thus far, his main focus will be to form a club culture and appoint the right people around him. The big picture is to show gradual improvement and resilience from a young and inexperienced side. Game plan wise, the emphasis for 2021, as stated by David himself, is to be a mostly attacking side with higher scoring capabilities, while also having a fully solidified defence by applying more pressure to the ball carrier. This is obviously just a blueprint, but when you look at last year, North were the second lowest scoring team in the competition behind Adelaide. Their game plan was really choppy, and a large amount of their inside 50s and rebound 50s were from forced kicks. Their zonal defence also had errors that made them vulnerable to outside players. So it's clear that David has identified these errors and has something to work with. So in a nutshell, the message for the players will be to take risks, and that the only way that you will achieve consistency is by learning from your mistakes, which will in time result in more wins. This is a philosophy that a handful of coaches have adopted in recent years. Coaches such as Chris Fagan and Brett Radden have repeatedly addressed this message to their playing group and to the media. And because of this philosophy, and his overall experience in coaching, list managing, and identifying how coaches approach their players on and off the field, I believe that David will be a great fit for North Melbourne. Now let's look at their list. Looking at the outs in the off-season, North did end up losing two of arguably their best players in Shaun Higgins and Ben Brown. Shaun Higgins, without a doubt, was their biggest out, as he is a game changer, and to me was the sharpest player in the team. His speed and ability to hit packs is nothing short of elite, and his distribution of the ball is first class. And although he didn't play his best season last year, he was still valuable for when the Roos got their asses handed to them. The same couldn't be said for Brown, however, who clearly struggled in 2020. There have been many suggestions as to why he struggled, but the conclusion I've come to has to do with North's game style under Reece Shaw. You see, Brown's style of footy is to run off his man and lead to the ball, so he can take an uncontested mark and can therefore score off his set shots. The problem was that because the entries last year were mostly from hacked kicks, the ball more often than not fell on top of Brown's head, rather than in front of him. Looking forward though, I think that the decision to get rid of these players will prove to be beneficial in the long run. The tall forward role at North will allow players like Larkey, Sherry and Comben to step up. Not to mention that Jane Stevenson has also been traded to the club, and he'll provide North with a bit of X factor, along with high potential players such as Cameron Zerha, Taron Thomas and Curtis Taylor. All these players will be the important keys for Noble to unleash his new attacking game plan. And as for Higgins, although no players can replicate his speed and running ability, their midfield in 2021 will have a new dynamic. Starting things off, you have one of the best ruckmans in the game, Todd Goldstein, who is one of the best hit-out players in the competition. He taps to advantage, he creates clearances, and is a top 5 ruckman in the league. In the centre, you have 2019 Best and Fairest winner Ben Cunnington coming back from injury, one of the best in and under players in the competition, who'll provide leadership to a young core of midfielders. He's a contested player, he can shrug off tackles similar to Dustin Martin, and is one of those players where if he's playing in your team, he makes everyone around him look better. Adding to the guts, we have Jai Simpkin and Luke Davies-Uniacke, both players under 22, both had stellar 2020 seasons, and will be looking to carry their form into next year. Simpkin is slowly becoming one of the best evasive players in the league, and plays with so much composure, like how Scott Pendlebury plays his game in slow motion. His composure and his endurance are some of his biggest assets. Davies-Uniacke, on the other hand, has been riddled with injuries and a lack of training for the past 2 years, yet despite all this, he shined in the second half of last year. His inside work has been great, and he gets the ball out of contested situations that often leads to scores. Some great early signs, but under a full season, as long as he can remain healthy, things may start to click for LDU. Plus, waiting on the interchange will be number 3 draft pick Will Phillips, who many expect will come in and make an immediate impact, as he's projected to be the best midfielder in this draft class and could be 2021's Caleb Sarong. There's not much I can go off for Phillips, but draft experts have said that he's a ball winner and has great speed and endurance, so I'll take their word for it.
In my opinion, he was much better than Anderson last year's pick 2, and then Sarong and Flanders, I thought he was a little more consistent then over the course of the final series, and in terms of impact per possession, probably I'd argue a little higher. So that just speaks to how advanced his game is for his age.
The last player in the centre, Jed Anderson, will also be fighting for a spot to start in the middle, but maybe on the interchange at this rate. The only thing holding him back from starting in the middle is his disposal abilities. He's a hard nut, he has the ability to hunt the ball, he's an accumulator, but he rarely impacts games with his disposals. But there'll be a new mentality at North, where you'll have to fight for your spot. And that all goes to show that if Anderson is a player that can't even start in a predicted wooden spoon side, then your team is doing something right. The players we can expect to be on the wings will be Jared Pollock, Bailey Scott, and Trent Dumont. Pollock himself is a handy player, and a player that I think not enough people get enough credit for. He's a great attacking wing, arguably one of the best in the competition, but the problem was that he was ousted for a few games last year. He's not the most reliable defensive winger, but he's a big-bodied midfielder who always goes in hard in the contest and takes the game on. Despite his size, he's extremely athletic, but he could flourish if Noble gives him an attacking role. As for the other wingers, Scott and Jamon will also be handy role players, where they can help assist Noble's game plan in harassing the ball and playing that run and carry style. I expect Scott will probably be gifted more games than Jamon because of age, but it's too early to tell. Noble may decide that Jamon will be more important, as he plays more of a defensive winger and is one of the fastest players in the team. But we'll have to see, the preseason's yet to come. Now talking about their backline, admittedly there's a lot to be desired here, but the early signs are proving to be positive. We'll start things off with reigning best and fairest winner Luke McDonald. There have been many suggestions to put him on the wing, however due to his breakout year last year on the half-back flank, I think it'd be irresponsible for Noble to move him out of his preferred position. Right now he's North's most important player because of his ability to negate star players. Some of his best performance involves shutting down all-Australian type players in Marcus Bontempelli, Patrick Dangerfield, Toby Green and Dylan Shields. Other players in the backline can include veteran Robbie Tarrant, who's been a consistent backman for the Roos throughout his career. He's been unlucky not to be named in the All-Australian squad in the past 5 years. He can take on talls and smalls, and is one of the most reliable players in the team. You also have former GWS defender Aidan Corr, who's more inconsistent than Melbourne's weather, but is still a solid player at his best. He's a good kick, he's very quick and versatile for a player his size, and will be North's third tall in the backline, replacing Ed Vickers-Willis. Ben Mackay is another name that comes to mind, and he for me is going to be North's next breakout player for 2021. He held his own last year as a fullback, and prevented superstars like Tom Lynch, Charlie Dixon and Eric Hipwood from having impact games. Now yes, every one of these players did at least kick a goal on him, but if you look at his highlights, he'll never shy away from putting his body into a contest. His courage and determination is why I think he'll have a breakout year. The last player I'll mention is Flynn Perez, who didn't play too many games last year, but playing as the other halfback flanker, I expect that North will want to pump games into him next year. His early signs are that he can tag and tackle, and although it is a huge responsibility for a guy that's only played 3 games to step up, as long as he can link up plays and garner a fair amount of touches, then he should reserve his spot as a starter. There are other defenders I could have included, such as Kyron Hayden, Josh Walker and Sean Atley, but the issue is that these players will be fighting for the same spot, and I don't have a definitive answer as to who will start first. So what do I think is the best case scenario for North? If I'm being honest, I can see them winning up to 7 or 8 games, depending on if it remains a 22 game season. And let me ask a controversial question. Does North have the most underrated midfield in the competition? I don't think that the players themselves are underrated, but because North are the easiest team to write off, have you once heard anyone in this off-season compliment the midfield? All the talk has been around the Dockers midfield with Fife, Brayshaw, Sarong, Chera, Darcy and Akers, but can the Roos soon match this midfield? If we compare the Dockers to the Roos midfield, you have Goldstein, Cunnington, Simpkin, Davies-Uniacke, Anderson, Scott and Polek. Now yes, the Roos are not on the same level yet, but let's admit, apart from some Freo fans, we all thought that Fremantle's midfield last year was fairly average. A handful of their players were unproven, and many of us thought that they would be a bottom 4 side. 6 months later, under great coaching, the Dockers are all of a sudden the hype of the AFL. And I'm not saying that the Roos will become Freo, but the Dockers will be seen as the benchmark for North in 2021. So thank you all for watching. I hope I've given you a different perspective on North Melbourne. If you're a Roos fan watching this, I look forward to watching your team play next year. The future looks bright, and I think this will be the year where we will look back on and say, this was the year when North started their journey under David Noble. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers. Does North have the most underrated midfield in the competition?
Sorry, we all think you're fucking stupid.